started his career in 1987 with the Douglas County Sheriff's Department. He spent 21 years with the Greenwood Village Police Department and joined the Golden Police Department in January of 2015. Joe has a master's degree in criminal justice and a certificate in police executive leadership from the University of Colorado. Joe believes in a multidimensional approach to solving crime and social disorder issues through results-driven policing, which includes the utilization of data, community engagement, advanced problem solving, and the application of traditional law enforcement strategies. He understands that success is enhanced through the process of building and establishing long-term partnerships within the community and allowing police officers to use sound judgment and discretion in the application of their duties. So there's a lot more on his bio. I cut it down there. I didn't want to keep us on track here. So with that, Deputy Chief Joe Harvey.
Good evening, everybody. And I just want to say thank you so much for asking Steph and I to join you tonight. It is a true honor for us to be here to be able to express our thoughts, represent our police department, represent our community. And really, I want us to kind of all look at this as the first initial steps for us to build trust, hopefully some mutual respect, some mutual understanding. And the things that I'm going to share with you tonight, I think we're doing some things really well, but you're also going to hear me tell you that there are things that the Golden Police Department can do better. That we in law enforcement can do better. But I speak to you tonight as a person of character and a human, a person who is flawed and has made mistakes, but tries to learn and become a better person. And that's what I try to do as a leader within our law enforcement organization, is to encompass and embody, I think, the characteristics that most of us dream about from our law enforcement professionals. So as I go through, and I'm going to have to do these fairly quickly, not as I won't be as robust as I was during the listening session where we were able to come back and actually respond to a lot of these themes because I just don't have enough time. But I want everybody to know that I'll give you my email address and my personal phone number at the end of this. And if anybody wants to engage in a conversation with me, can be done via email, over a phone, or in person. That I truly believe that progress is made one conversation at a time, one step at a time. So as I've moved forward through the themes, I'm going to try to answer some of the questions that were raised to Tyler. I've looked at those questions and broke them down into the themes. So I'm going to try to address these and your questions all at the same time. So the first theme that we shared was how can we increase community engagement between the police department and the community? And what I can tell you is we're doing a good job, and we can do a much better or a great job in this arena. So to share with you some of the things we do, we obviously have our major National Night Out event that happens every August. It's extremely well attended by community members within Golden, and we get to share everything that we do about police. And you guys as a citizen gets to come in and ask lots of questions and see the different things that we do for you as our community. But there are other things we do. There are other programs. Stephanie talked about one of the big ones, which is our Citizens Academy. And I would encourage each of you to attend the Citizens Academy. It's a year-long program where you get the opportunity to kind of learn about each incremental position within our department and what we do and how we go about doing it. It's a great opportunity for adults to kind of learn about the Golden Police Department and get to meet a lot of members of our police department. And I can't tell you how much offline discussions really lead towards the improvement and the increase in knowledge about what we do, why we do them. And it's those conversations that I think spark additional discussion. We also do a youth academy, and those are for our kids, and that's a week-long academy. And then we do something that's different. I don't know if there's many other agencies, even in the United States, that do this. It's called the Safety Academy. And I'm going to again ask all of you to consider that, and because it really teaches you about how to not be a victim of crime. instead of us always taking police reports, we wanted to do something that teaches people to how to be proactive. And it's not just about being a victim of a crime, but it's how do you protect your home against fires? What do I do if my car breaks down in the middle of a winter storm? Things along those lines. One of the other things we're looking at doing right now, we've started the research, is a restorative justice program for children. One of the questions that I'll get to later about school resource officers is that I want you all to understand that the Golden Police Department is not about pushing kids into the criminal justice system. It is the chief's belief, it is our department's belief that children deserve a chance, kids deserve a chance um, to make a bad decision, learn from it, and move forward. And that's the way we believe. So we have a philosophy where if there's any way we can't charge somebody, then we think it's important not to do that. A restorative justice program is a program where it will allow the victim to work with the family as an alternative to criminal charging. So we're looking heavily at that program. They are they are pretty expensive, but we're certainly doing some research there. And then I think the one thing that I want to share with you is where we're moving forward, and this is some of the area that we can improve upon is number one is Stephanie's program, and that's improving our Citizens Academy and bringing folks back into the fold. But the other one is when we listened to the first community meeting where you folks had the opportunity to speak to us, one of the things that we got out of that was the opportunity to create a community engagement group. So we're going to call it the KEG. And what we want to do with that, and I got to be honest with you, we're just in the infancy stages of developing this. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I do know it's going to have a few members of the Golden Police Department and a number of members of our community. And we are going to work together sometimes on a weekly basis, but always on a monthly basis to improve our relationship and how we can go about doing a better job as a law enforcement agency. And we need to hear from our community about things that we can do better and how you all, as members of our community, the people we are charged with keeping safe, want us to do a better job. And so some of the things that I brought up to the chief was maybe our first project is that we rebrand ourselves. The mission, vision, and value statement we have in our department is 18 years old. It was brought in by the chief. And I asked him if he would be willing to let this community engagement group rebrand the Golden Police Department. What should be our mission, vision, and values, and work in partnership with the police department so that we can create a new mission and vision and values that will take us into the future. Other programs and ideas that we've talked about is maybe we get a member of the community to be trained and participate in our incident review board. The incident review board is the group of subject matter experts in our department that reviews every single use of force, every pursuit, every time we get into a foot pursuit or a car pursuit. If we used force to enter into somebody's home or a business, every one of these events gets reviewed by a group of subject matter experts, and maybe we can find a way to train a member of our community or two to participate in that group. Another one is we have a policy committee. Maybe we can train a member of our community or two to participate in our committee that evaluates every single policy that goes to the chief of police for formal approval. So this is just the beginning. These are the things that we've started talking about. And so I've charged Sergeant Maynard and our community engagement group to kind of build the box that will start the process. But it is only a start. I can't tell you today, because that was one of the questions that was brought up is, how are we going to invite people into this process? We're still working on that. I hope to have an answer by no later than mid-January, and we want to get this up and running by February. So it is important. It will require the community, this group of community members, to help us figure out what it's going to look like. So it's just started. I'm very excited about it. I think it's going to be an incredible opportunity, and I think it's going to really help our organization move forward. So theme number 2, what does the police department stand on the implementation of body-worn cameras? I can answer this question pretty quickly. We actually started doing significant research very early on with body worn cameras, probably about 3 years ago. We were very close to moving forward with the body worn camera program. We had written a policy. That policy had been reviewed by the ACLU and other outside sources. Our policy was considered to be very robust and ready to be implemented. We actually worked with the Wheat Ridge Police Department and obtained grant funding. But as it turned out, the cost of a body worn camera system is in perpetuity. So it is very expensive to implement a body worn camera system. So I can tell you the current quote I have is about $1 million over 10 years. So we decided not to at that time to move forward with a body worn camera system. Now we fast forward to 2020 and we have a litany of significant events that impacted our community, impacted people of color, and impacted law enforcement. And as a result of that, our legislators came out with Senate Bill 217, and they now require the use of body worn camera systems by every law enforcement agency in Colorado by July of 2023. So the Golden Police Department could have very easily sat back and said, well, we're going to wait until January of 2023. But that is not the case. We have worked extremely hard to get our body worn camera system up and a budget item to go in front of council. I'll be doing a presentation to council tomorrow night in which we are looking to get a sole source contract. If it is approved, we will be under contract by the end of the week. And we will be implementing body worn cameras in the first to second quarter of next year. As I told you, the cost is expensive. The cost does end up coming out of our general fund, which is paid for from a number of different taxes. But we think it's important, and we hope that you all believe that it's important. I can tell you that I came from a previous agency in which we had cameras in every single police car. I was actually one of the first police officers in Colorado to have a police car when I was a DUI officer in Douglas County. So I understand the value that it brings. It protects all parties, but understand it is not a panacea, doesn't catch everything, but it does catch the majority of things. And we think it's going to be beneficial to our community. We think it's going to be beneficial to our officers. I also want to share with you that when it comes to body worn cameras, there's not an officer in our department who is not in support of this program. They all want body worn cameras too. So I think that knowing the officers want it, knowing that we have a policy that's already been reviewed by the ACLU, that we will be able to get this program implemented in a timely manner. And I hope that it will begin to reestablish transparency and trust within our community. The third theme that we talked about was regarding use of force and de-escalation training. This is an area that I think our department has done a pretty good job on. And we've actually been a little bit ahead of the curve in comparison to some other agencies. So what I can tell you is that our department has implemented things, for example, like verbal judo, which is a de-escalation tool. We've been doing these kinds of training for a very, very long time. We want our officers to be able to de-escalate scenarios, not to escalate scenarios. It is important for every member of our community when they engage a Golden police officer to be able to feel safe and secure and know that they are going to be treated with dignity and respect. And so we do that regardless of the scenario. And many times our officers know they're going to be challenged with dealing with an individual who may be experiencing mental crisis, or they may be in the middle of an incident where they have used too many drugs or alcohol and it's impairing their decision-making model. And we want our officers to be able to be trained to recognize those, talk to those individuals in a manner that we can try to get them to understand that we are there to help. But it's more than that, right? Because we also have to deal with people who are frustrated and angry, and those kinds of emotions are driving the contact. And the worst thing that can happen is for the officer to escalate, and then we end up getting into a terrible scenario that is bad for the citizen that is being contacted. It is embarrassing for our organization, and it is embarrassing to our community. So we make sure that we provide our officers with the tools to try to calm that down. So what are we doing today? Well, I can tell you, before George Floyd, before uh, Breonna Taylor, before these scenarios happened, we actually sent two people out to California to become trainers in ICAT. And ICAT stands for Integrating Communication, Assessment, and Tactics. We finished our first series of trainings with the last group of officers today. And that training starts with about 4 hours. And all it is about is de-escalation. It is about taking officers in real scenarios and how we can actually calm a situation down so that it doesn't go to force. The training doesn't stop with just this first series of 4 hours. It'll be built into our in-house in-service training, which will happen in February, where every officer will go through an additional 18 hours of training. And a lot of that is scenario based. So now we evaluate real body worn camera footage, and we talk about the tools that we can use to de-escalate that event. What could we have done as a law enforcement agency to stop this scenario from having gone from an initial contact to a use of force? So that's another series of training we're implementing. Some of the other training we're implementing is called ABLE training, which is from the Georgetown Law School. And ABLE training is all about teaching officers how to intervene. When is it proper to intervene? Not just in use of force, but in other policy violations. It is also teaching them, when you see one of your fellow officers that the scenario is building outside of their control and the officer is starting to lose maybe their temper, or it appears that maybe they're going to escalate that, because they're humans on the other end of it too. They make mistakes also. That the officer knows how to intervene and jump into that scenario and say, "Hey, Steph, let me talk to this person for a minute." That officer gets a chance to go calm down, and somebody new goes in and says, "Hey, let me talk to you," and try to get the attention in a different direction and get the situation under control. The other part about it, though, is ensuring that our officers understand about the abuses and misuses of their position. What are we doing that can create distrust within our community? And how do we teach our officers to make sure that they don't go down that path? So we want to make sure we prevent all misconduct. And we want our officers to be, just like you as citizens, to be the eyes and ears for our other officers to avoid this kind of contact. We can teach it, but we need everybody on the front line to be watching for it and make sure that it doesn't happen. And when it does happen, what is the mechanism for them to report that so that it is reported up the chain of command immediately? We can get it investigated. So we're sending a commander, it'll be Commander Drew Williams, this month to that training. And then that training is going to be implemented to all of our officers in February as well. And that's an additional 9-hour class. On top of all of that, we do all of the standard use of force training. We teach our officers how to use appropriate force. We go over all of our policies. It is ingrained into our officers that they always use the least amount of force possible. And I can tell you that I'm very proud about this. We have about between 90 and 120 use of force incidents per year. Now, when I say 90 to 120 incidents of uses of force, you might sit back and say, wow, that's a lot of force being used on people in our community. And it is. What I can tell you is that 95% of those is just our officers putting their hands on somebody to control movement, to get them to calm down, to hold them on a gurney as we're getting ready to take them to the hospital. Very few of these use of force scenarios involve an officer striking, kicking, or otherwise taking an individual to the ground. What that means is that in our department, anytime an officer places their hands on a citizen, it gets reported to our department through a system called Blue Team. They have to report all of the findings. They have to attach all of the reports. They have to attach photographs if they're taking, and all of those are reviewed by our incident review board, which is made up of the 3 command staff members outside of the chief and a number of subject matter experts. And every single one of these events are reviewed and scrutinized to make sure that the officers were acting within policy. Was there an issue with the policy that we need to change? And so while it does seem like a lot, I can tell you the vast majority of those are just officers using their hands to calm somebody down, to get them into control. Doesn't mean that occasionally we have to take people down. We do. What I can tell you is that I have to be brutally honest with you. I want you to understand that our department wants to do the right thing. We're only 51 police officers. We do our very best to hire the absolute best people we can. But we're human and we do make mistakes. What I can tell you is that when you're getting ready to take somebody into custody, and if the person on the other end is committed to not being taken into custody, it doesn't look pretty when the officer is put in a situation to use force. And as we like to say sometimes, you have fists flying and knees flying and gears flying off, and it looks terrible. And it is terrible. But in those scenarios, the officer is as scared as the person who is in the situation. And what I can tell you is that many times the person who is in the situation, they may not just be committed to not being arrested, they may be in fear of being arrested. And that's why they're responding the way they are. But the officer may not know that. And so sometimes it is a lack of communication or not knowing that creates these scenarios that look very ugly. It does not take away from the fact that we in society have seen many scenarios in which police have used excessive force. It doesn't mean that the Golden Police Department is not devoid of these scenarios. We have our own crosses to bear. In Chief Kilpatrick's history, he has fired an employee for using excessive force. What it means is that we have to use both of our eyes. We have to use both of our ears. And we have to use the brain that God gave us to use good common sense and judgment. And that's how we train our officers to de-escalate and try to bring every scenario to a point where all of us go home safely. That includes victims, witnesses, the officer, and yes, the person who is the focus of our investigation. And we don't always do it best, but I can tell you without fail, we review these scenarios and we hold people accountable when their behavior or their actions are outside of our policy or what we believe is right and dignified. So let's go on to theme number 4. Where does the police department stand on crisis intervention training? I can tell you that the Golden Police Department was one of the first agencies to get very actively involved in crisis intervention training. It is a critically important tool. About 95% of our commissioned personnel have been through CIT training. We want every officer, and the only ones that haven't right now are the brand new officers. So as soon as they get on board, it is one of the first schools that they have to go to. So Joe Page, Officer Joe Page is one of our officers. He's the actual coordinator for CIT in Jeffco. He makes sure the information gets out, and every one of our supervisors know that when that training comes out and the dates are identified, if they have an officer on their team who has not gone, they get registered that year. So all of our new officers will be trained. But officers come and go, and so we want to make sure that the new ones come in, we get them trained. What I do need you to understand, though, is that sometimes you bring in an officer like Stephanie Sipes, who has experience from another agency, and they have exposure to different events. Sometimes we have a brand new officer who might be young and experienced in life, and we give them this training. It doesn't mean that just because they had the training that they're going to be very good at using it, right? As we all know, we gain experience through learning, we gain experience through exposure, and we gain experience through making mistakes and learning from our mistakes. So we want our officers through the use of CIT to become very robust in learning how to de-escalate these scenarios and talk, I think, with a kind tone, a respectful tone, a dignified tone to every person they come into contact with, regardless of how frustrated or angry or whatever event that person may be going through. One of the questions that came up that says that what are our rights in regards to recording police officers during a potential altercation? So for example, if I see a police officer interacting with somebody, I want to record it. Can I record it on my phone? The answer is yes. If you're on a public street and you're using your phone, you can record it. What I will tell you is sometimes that recording can become evidence, and we may ask you to give us that recording so that we can use it as part of the evidence. But yes, you are entitled to record it. We want to make sure that that becomes part of the record if they see it. And we have had lots of scenarios in which that happened. And I would be dismayed if a member of the Golden Police Department walked up to you as a member of the community and told you to stop recording. I just would be very dismayed if that happened. Our officers know that people are recording. We tell them that, we teach them that, and they know that it is your right as a citizen to record that interaction. I hope that in every one of those scenarios, our officers are doing their job at the best of their ability and that you're proud of them when you walk away. That you post something good on YouTube that says, I'm proud of my officers for how they handled this particular scenario. Doesn't mean we won't make mistakes, and you won't be sending me that video to take a look at. If that happens, I promise you I will. Now, back on theme 3, because I missed a couple of these, there was a question about defunding the police, and the question is about purchasing assault weaponry and redirecting that funding towards training and therapy. What I can tell you is that defunding the police, I don't think is the right answer. And I'm not saying that just because it's the field in which I work in. We still need to be able to put enough police officers out on the street so that you can feel safe in your home, so that people are monitoring your roadway, so that you can travel amongst our city in a safe manner, that our officers are engaging with you about social disorder issues you may be facing in your community, whether that is somebody leaving an abandoned vehicle in your neighborhood, or you see a suspicious person lurking around in the middle of the night. We still have to be able to respond to those. But what it doesn't mean is that we can't do things different, or maybe there are different programs that we can look at and reevaluate. And I'm going to get to those when we get later into this discussion. But what I can tell you is that when we use the word assault weaponry, there is a reason that police officers carry, and the weapon you're probably talking about here is an AR-15. For many, many years, police officers didn't carry AR-15s. I know when I first started in law enforcement, I carried a revolver, and then the advent of the semi-automatic weapon came in, and the only weapons I had was a shotgun and a revolver. Now officers have less lethal machineries in their vehicles. They have shotguns, they have rifles, and they have pistols. What I can tell you is that based on this question, if we were to lock those items up and there was a school shooting at Golden High School, our officers would have to respond to the department, run inside the building, get the AR-15 out, get back in their car, and respond back to the school. And what I can tell you is that countless lives will have been lost. We train our officers in the appropriate use of that weapon. Those weapons are not pulled out unless it is an extreme situation. They are locked up and are not displayed unless the situation calls for it. So I think, in short, to say that we shouldn't have those weapons or we should lock them up isn't the right response. The right response is making sure that every officer knows when and how to display and use that weapon in only the situations where it is appropriate. And I can tell you that that's what we're doing within our department, and we will continue to do that within our department. Another question was, would like some estimates on when use of force will be reviewed by the ACLU. What I can tell you is our policy, our new use of force policy, has been sent to the ACLU. It was sent at the local level, and then it has now been sent out to the national level. We are waiting for their response back. Our use of force policy has been reviewed by a professor who is an expert in use of force from the University of Colorado. It has been reviewed by an outside attorney who is an expert in these types of situations. It has been reviewed by our internal legal counsel. The policy, I think, is exceptionally well written. but we have not implemented that new policy, and we won't implement it until the ACLU comes back and provides us their insight. This is not the first time we have invited the ACLU to review a policy. We have had them review our transgender policy, and we have had them review, I'm losing it right now, the policy I just talked about earlier today. It's escaping me right now. Now they have our use of force policy. So we try to utilize a lot of outside resources. They're going to bring us back their input and their thoughts. We will implement those in the policy, and then it will be sent out to our folks. So let's move on. Theme number 5. And I'm going to try to keep my emotions in check on this. I'm going to be honest with you. The theme number 5 is about explicit and implicit bias and training within our department. This is probably the one topic that is very emotional for me. It resonates deep within who I am as a person. I've been in law enforcement for 33 years. I have yet to see a law enforcement agency do this well. And that's just the honest truth. When I talk to a young officer, I always tell them it is not the name on your nameplate that you represent. And it is not the name on the top of this badge that says Golden Police Officer on it that you represent. It is a profession. It is our society. It is the sanctity of allowing people to feel safe in their homes. It is allows them, when they see a police officer, to know that that person is there to help them, not hurt them, not put a person down, but to rise a person up. That when we find somebody in a hole, we get a rope and we throw it down to them, and we gather 15 other people to help carry them out. That we represent our community. But we haven't done that very well. The training has been basic. In all honesty, this is a societal issue. That's why this group was created, right? One person, one contact, one step at a time. I am married to a person of color. My wife is Mexican. My children are biracial. It took me a year to get one of my boys to recognize and understand that their skin looks different than the kids they go to school with. To the point now where my kid will say, my skin is brown. It's the first time. We have to start and engage in conversations, one person at a time. What I can tell you is that the Golden Police Department takes this seriously. We brought in outside instructors. Some of the instruction went well, some of it went terribly bad. We reevaluated. How do we bring this message to our own folks to do a better job? We decided that we were going to go internally with people we know in our own department that are as passionate about this topic as I am, and that each of you are. We have a African American female. We have a Hispanic female. We have a gay man that is on our training group. We are recruiting others to join in, to become educated, to learn, to go to schools and bring the information back, to challenge the thought processes of our officers. I can tell you that during our first class, they showed 2 pictures. One picture was of Bruce Jenner and the other one was of Caitlyn Jenner. And we engaged in conversation. We allowed people to express their feelings. We allowed folks to speak out, maybe in a way that some of us didn't believe in. But then we questioned that and we engaged in that. And not everybody left the room feeling the same way. Not everybody in the room felt the same way about these two very different pictures. We brought up two pictures of two homeless people and asked people what they thought. Our officers, our employees. The next two pictures came up and they were actors, which were the same two actors that were portrayed in the homeless picture. I can share with you that I have been homeless twice in my life. I know what it's like to not have a roof over your head. I know what it's like to struggle for food. I've lived in a tent and I've lived in a shack. I've had no food. I have taken baths in a freezing cold creek. I have wanted for lots of things and had nothing. I have been in the room when I have heard my own officers talking about homeless folks in a manner that I did not appreciate. We are learning. We are growing, but we are not perfect. We are not doing the best. All I can promise you is that we're working on it. And we will continue to strive to teach our folks the same way that you all are reaching out to our golden community to try to do better. That is our commitment. Next theme, co-responder program. We do have a co-responder program. It is actually funded through a grant, and we share two different co-responders. They both have master's degrees. They're clinicians. They're very experienced in counseling. These folks are, again, on a grant. The grant funding is limited. We share them with Jeffco, Jeffco, Wheat Ridge, Edgewater, and Golden. Our two co-responders are in the department a lot. They work very closely with our officers. This is that one program that I can go back and tell you there's been a lot of discussion, and actually some of the questions that are on the questions that Ty sent me have a lot to do with about this. I don't know where the co-responder program is going to go long term. What I can tell you is that we found it to be very, very successful. I know that the chief and the city manager have engaged in conversations that when the grant funding goes out, where do we go from here? I know that the chief supports the program. I believe the city manager supports the program. I believe our council supports the program. It is about, at the end of the day, whether we can bring somebody on long-term to fill that role only for Golden. Does it have roots? Yes. Where's it going to go? I don't have the answer for you today. What I can tell you is that when our officers come into contact with a person who is experiencing mental crisis, that information is just not filed away in a report and then is forgotten about. That information gets to our co-responder and Joe Page, who is the officer who engages and is as close to an expert as I know, who doesn't have a degree in psychology, in handling people who are experiencing mental crises and other types of crises as well. And then there is follow-up. The co-responder and our officer Page, they go back out, they recontact, and they try to get these folks help. So where's it going to go long term? I don't know the exact answer, but I do know it's important. I know it's on the radar, and we're engaging in conversations about making it a more robust program for the Golden Police Department. So some of the questions that came up with this one is, do you see a fundamental change down the pipeline for policing? Yes, I do. I see. So we not only have the co-responder, but we have the homeless navigator. I don't know if any of you have heard about that program, but there's a homeless navigation program going on in Jeffco. All of the agencies have somebody that is committed to this program. It's about getting resources to our homeless community. And we are working hard in that program. The city just went in with Wheat Ridge and Edgewater to have a civilian in that role. And then we also have an officer in our community engagement group that works with that group. What I can tell you is that there's two different roles here, right? Because the homeless navigator, the civilian, they're about resources and getting people help. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes the police officer is responsible for following up on law violations. And so sometimes those two things can create some consternation. So we're working through some of those pitfalls now. It's a brand new program. We've only had our officer involved in it for about 6 months. So we're learning and we're growing as we move forward. We're hoping that Rebecca, when she gets on board in January and starts taking on that civilian role and really works through, I think, the social aspects of it, that we'll learn how to work better together and make that program better. So I do think that homeless navigation and co-responders, yes, those are things that we're working on, not only locally, but I think nationally. There's a lot of people talking about how can we get police officers to not respond to these kinds of calls unless there's a need for a police officer to be at those calls. So I think that's something that's coming. Another question that came up on this deals with JeffCom. They talk about, say, a domestic abuse call for service. How do they know if an officer is CIT trained, or if we can get a social worker to attend that call? That's a good question. The JeffCom dispatcher will have no clue who's a CIT officer. I can tell you that at least in 95% of the cases, you're going to get an officer responding who is CIT trained, because we place a high emphasis on it. But the dispatcher won't know that. We've just made it requirement as a fundamental training loop for our police officers. Now, regarding a social worker, the the JeffCom dispatcher is not going to call out a co-responder program. It is going to be up to the supervisor or the officer involved. If it's happening at night, there's not going to be a co-responder available. So the information will be taken, we'll get it to the co-responder, and they follow up after the event. We just don't have people that can work 24 hours a day, right? We only have 2 folks. So most likely it's going to be a call based on the officer and the supervisor that are on. What I can tell you is that Joe Page, the co-responder coordinator that I told you about, he listens to his radio all the time. So if it is during business hours and he hears a call, he immediately responds. And then we are trying to get a co-responder during business hours to respond and help with us as well. So it's kind of a hit and miss right now until these programs become more robust down the road. We have to live with the resources that we have. And they're not as good as we'd like. We'd like to have enough that we could have somebody working at night, because that's when most of these calls are happening. But that's just not the case right now. So another question that came up here was regarding the Methodist Church and safe parking started. And it looks like we had about 5 cars there. And they wanted to know why it warranted such a show of force. I'm started to do some research. I don't have an exact answer for you on that question. I will continue to try to figure out who was there and what the scenario was, but without a date. If somebody is online right now that wrote that question, if you can get me the date that it happened, I can try to get that information to Tyler and Jason and see if they can get that answer back out to you. It might be that we were just there engaging people. I don't know for certain of a call for service or something that might have required those. So I don't have an exact answer for that. Back on theme 5, because I missed a couple of questions. Does GPD get calls about Black people visiting our town? I can tell you that that is the case. I wished it wasn't, but the truth of the matter is we get calls where we believe that the reason for the call was that the person was the wrong color. And that's just the truth of the matter. I don't like it. I know each of you doesn't like it. When the police department gets a call for service, an officer is sent out to investigate. And I can tell you many times our officers are en route and they're saying to themselves, this is a kid selling news. This is going to be a kid selling magazines. And when I get there, the kid's going to be Black. And that's why I got called, not because the kid was doing something wrong. We didn't create the call for service. It was given to us. And you have an expectation that when an officer gets a call for service, that they'll go and do an investigation. And so many times they will go, they'll make a contact, and then they will leave and say, you're not doing anything wrong, walk away. I can tell you when I worked at Greenwood Village, Donnie Perry, who ultimately became our chief of police, is African-American. And at night, he was clearing a vehicle that was left parked abandoned, and the car was reported stolen. And so he had a spotlight on the car and he was walking around it. And a citizen called into our dispatch center and said, there's a Black man getting ready to steal a car. That black man was in full uniform in a marked unit and was taking care of a report. These are the things that we face as a society, not just us in law enforcement. It's as a society. Um, all I can tell you is it hurts my heart when these scenarios happen. We teach our officers to treat people with dignity and respect, and I hope that they are doing that. And if they don't, we will hold them accountable. That is my promise. But the answer to your question is yes, sometimes we get those calls. And yes, sometimes we respond to those calls. And I hope in every one of those situations, our officers treat them fairly.
Hey Joe, I just wanted to thanks for going in here. I just wanted to let people know we're getting close to that 7:30, so we can let it go a little bit longer. But just in the for everyone's timing, I want to just be cognizant of that. So how many more of the questions did we have on there right now?
There's a couple more themes. So the 8
Okay.
can't wait. I'm just not going to answer that one right now because it's going to take a lot of time. I can tell you on the 8 can't wait stuff, just about every policy issue is covered in our policy. Every one of those situations is addressed in our policy. Um, the STAR program that goes back to the co-responder. We will look at anything and everything that is brought to our police department. That is a promise. We will look at every one of those programs. We will evaluate them. We think there's value in those. But right now we are not implementing a STAR program. We don't have the resources to implement a STAR program. We think the concept is usable and workable. It's just a matter of resource allocation at this point. But if we're able to get there, we will. Theme 9 is about school resource officers. What I can tell you is I've already told you our officers are trained that we are not about charging kids. I can tell you that the law enforcement role of the officer is the lowest priority. If you can imagine a triangle in front of you, the word mentor is in the middle. That is the number one responsibility. At the top is teacher. At the other end is counselor. At the other end is law enforcement officer. Three of those things deal with our officers getting individual contact with kids and talking to them about their problems, issues they may be facing, and helping them. It's mentoring, it's teaching, it's coaching, it's counseling our kids to become better members of society. We only charge when we have to. Um, the last question was on theme 10, which was about data. We're working on it. We've reevaluated a position and created a crime analyst. So we're working diligently, but we haven't got all of those things put together yet. We're starting to put new stats out on our website and our webpage. So that stuff's going to be coming. We are data driven. We want to use data driven policing. So that's just something that know that's coming, but it's going to be a work in progress. And then Tyler, until you tell me to stop, I'm going to see if I can answer one or two more of these other questions that came up.
Well, what I think what would be good is we have one more thing that we wanted to address with our community with some of the letters that had been sent. So we want to just let our and maybe we can wrap up, and then if you'd stay for a couple more minutes and answer some of those questions and let others in on that. So Jason, do you want? Well, first of all, I want to say, Deputy Chief, if anyone else is leaving right now or has to leave, I know it's 7:30. I really appreciate you taking the time to detail all of this and go into all these stories. I know there's a lot of different emotions from everybody right now. Some things you might agree with, some things not. A lot of things are in the works right now, and I think that's where we as a community can now, this is recorded, we're going to put this on our YouTube channel, go through the things that might have, he might have said that you might not agree with and or that you do agree with, and see what the best way it is to mold those and give him your questions, your thoughts, your ideas. So once again, Deputy Chief, I really appreciate it. Jason, if you want to bring up the keynote just so we can and then we'll jump back to the questions.
Yeah, did you want to mention anything about the letter specifically now, Ty, while I'm sharing?
Yeah, well, so what I want to say is last weekend I was out with my family going around to anyone who has had Black Lives Matter signs in their yards, just giving some more GAC information and saying thank you for putting those out. I've been contacted from a few community members that they received a letter late Saturday or Sunday night going into Monday that was an anti-BLM letter. So I wanted to let you all know that we do know about this. I've let Deputy Chief Harvey know. I've let City Council know. I think if you have received one of those letters, please reach out to us with GAC, and we'd like to compile just so we know where that's coming from and keep some eyes on that. So everybody that, that has a Black Lives Matter sign in their yard feels extra safe, and, that we can take a look at that. So.
Cool, thank you. With that, I'm actually going to kick it over to Annie for our events and announcements, as we do. Oh, if it works. Oh, it does work. Go ahead, Annie, sorry.
Yeah, so really quick, two quick updates. Arvadans for Social Justice is essentially a sister organization to Golden Anti-Racism Collective based out of Arvada. They shared that the Jeffco Schools Foundation is finalizing their plans to distribute $30,000 in King Soopers gift cards at a grab and go location in Jeffco. To help families have a great holiday this year. So they're gonna need volunteers on tomorrow, the 10th, and next Thursday, December 17th. So I'll go ahead and share information about that in our follow-up email. It's a great opportunity to get involved. Wear your mask, socially distance, and be responsible. And then moving into 2021, I challenge each and every one of you who are here on the call today to bring a friend to our next GAC meeting. We want to see new faces. We love everyone who's here all the time. That's wonderful, but we would love to have some new faces at our meetings. We are trying to expand our membership and make sure that we are reaching more areas of the community. So as part of our challenge to you in January, it is to bring a friend and count it your New Year's resolution to continue to be a really good anti-racist individual in your community. And other than that, our next meeting is January 13th, which is on our regular cadence, second Wednesday of the month. And again, a reminder that if you do have some kind of organization or partnership that you think would be helpful for us getting out the word about Monica Duran in February, please shoot us an email. Other than that, I think we're pretty good. So I'll kick it back to Jason and then probably back to the Deputy Chief.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a quick pass here. Ty, what do you want to do? Do you want to open up the floor for some more questions for a little bit? And also the co-chairs, the four of us will be hanging around after we're officially wrapped up here. So if anyone wants to say hello or have questions, we haven't seen y'all in a month. We're not going to see you for a month potentially. So wanted to offer that as well. And you want to hit stop on the recording.
And it looks like there's some answers being posted in the chat also. So thank you, Joe.
Yeah, I don't know. I seem to have lost it. So maybe Ty, if you don't mind, could I just spend a few minutes if there's people that have a question that they could chime in and just ask? I was trying to go through the chat. There's a number of questions in there. I was trying to respond to some of those.
Yeah, I feel like, yeah, we're gonna have, I'll get you the one. So what was it was number 10, would like some estimates of use of force will be reviewed by the ACLU. Is that the one you'd answered yet?
I addressed that
Okay.
one. It is being reviewed by the ACLU.
Okay. Yeah, I think if you want to go through maybe a few of those, Hallie, Jason, what are your thoughts? Is there ones that you wanted to specifically go with?
We've got some really great questions in the chat, actually.
We've actually got a total. I'm fine with doing whatever in the moment. I really wanted to defer to the audience here. We've got, it looks like 10 or 15 questions just on the list that I've got. So this may be enough content, just throwing it out there, not announcing anything officially, but maybe we have the two of you back, because there's clearly a lot of stuff going on for an ongoing conversation. So maybe we revisit some of these questions in January when we've got a full 90 minutes to review. But with that, if anybody has anything top of mind that they want to jump in with, I'm fine with it.
Yeah. I do have one question that I wanted to address. One of the, I can't find the question here again, but it was about trying to engage a police officer during the anti-racism march earlier in the year. To be quite honest, I'm embarrassed that that officer ignored you or walked away or treated you in that manner. I hope you feel my passion when I talk about racism and those issues. I think it's important. Not everybody feels the way that I do. And I know that there are people around society, people that I may work with that may have different views or different thoughts than I do. What I can tell you is that's embarrassing. Um, that's not what we expect from our officers. And we expect our officers to, regardless of the situation, to engage members of the community in a respectful and dignified manner. And if that experience happened to you, I apologize on behalf of the Golden Police Department and that member. That is not our expectation, nor do we condone that. And had I personally seen it, I would have had a conversation with that person. So apologies. We're working on it. We're trying to reach people on a number of levels, and some of these things are some people just look at the world differently, and it's not just in our department, but in life in general. So I apologize for that contact for you.
Joe, is that something that that they could bring to this potential community engagement team?
Yeah.
Okay.
No question.
I really appreciate, this is Phil, Lori, and I was the one who had put that in there. And I really appreciate your asking that. And I think one of the setups, my fear was, that people assumed it was an anti-police rally, which for sure was a part of it. That is what kind of raised a lot of our consciousnesses up to the level of wanting to act. But I totally agree with you, what you said about it's a societal issue, and the police reflects that. And I wanted to just offer support for the officers, that I know your job is hard, but I appreciate their being there to help make it safe for us to march and participate. But my sense was really, and I wasn't sure if they were maybe people from outside the community who were brought in, but I really recognize that we're in it together, and my hope was to at least acknowledge kind of the irony, or the, you all are willing to go out there and put yourselves in danger for people who are possibly protesting against you. And so I just felt badly to not be able to appreciate the officers who were there. But I mean, they also were kind of working and watching things, so it wasn't necessarily the best time to engage. And there were probably people who were trying to antagonize them, or to potentially engage them negatively, or get something for their cell phones or whatever. But anyway, I appreciate your saying something, and it does make a difference, like we're in it together. So thanks.
Just one more comment on that, and thank you for sharing that. What I will tell you is that all of these issues are emotional for people. Now, how they respond to their emotion, or where their mindset, or how they're acting. Ty and I've had some conversations offline where this is really about how people were raised, how their original, what they were originally taught, how they were nurtured, impacts all of us and how we were raised. And some people carry those on into adulthood, and other people seek to understand, then to try to be understood. The issues from the BLM marches and anti-racism issues, they're emotional for people. That you can probably see from me that I'm emotional about it because I live, this on a daily basis also with my own family. And so, these things strike chords into people's hearts and their minds, and people respond very differently. And while we really try to root that stuff out of our department, it's I can't sit here and tell you that there's not somebody in our department that doesn't think differently than me, or maybe Stephanie. What I can tell you is that we have a very clear expectation. When you are wearing a golden uniform and you are on duty and you are representing this city and this community, you will do it with dignity and respect, and you will treat people properly. And when it doesn't happen, it is discouraging, and it hurts all of us. Everybody that's on this call and every other person who might have witnessed it. So, but I can't sit here and also tell you that everything that the police are hearing on the other end, when they're hearing for people to go out and kill police officers, that doesn't evoke an emotional response. So there's feelings on both sides. And this is why I say it's a societal issue. And we all have to engage in single conversations and then work them out to groups and more single conversations and more groups. And it is only through efforts like this group, or when we can sit down and talk individually, that we will all finally get there maybe in our lifetime. This has been happening for centuries. We don't click a finger and expect it to go away overnight. The work still has to be done, and it's going to be hard, and it's going to be dirty, and it's going to be emotional, and it is going to try every single one of us to our core. And there are going to be people that nobody will ever be able to reach or change their mental model. It is what they believe in their heart. That is sad. But all we got to do is find one. Then we find a second, and then a third, and then a fourth, and then a fifth, and it starts to grow. That's how we make this kind of change.
I think that's a really appropriate place to land the plane for a couple of reasons. The first being we have a ton of content and questions that the more I think about it as we're kind of talking here, it really would be great to have a follow-up conversation with the two of you if you're willing. And also, the other reason I think it's great to land the plane here is the difference between what we saw here tonight in Golden and what we often hear on the national stage is that there was not as much binary in this discussion, right? We hear a lot of binary, just like we learned about at Foothills Art Center. This discussion was one that was focused on humanity, which is something that even though we've not expressly talked about it, I think all four co-chairs try our absolute hardest to lead with. And I think hearing that we have a police department in a very small town that has a chance of becoming a national and global example of humanity is really exciting. So we'll look forward to having you on the next conversation. With that, we are officially ending this meeting. The co-chairs will be hanging on if you would like to say hello to us. Thank you everyone for coming. Have an amazing holiday and an amazing new year. We appreciate you all.
Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you for being
And
here.
anyone that wants to extend gratitude, feel free to unmute and just say thank you, especially to continue taking questions